This is AV SuperFriends Perspectives, a collection of interviews, discussions, and presentations from conferences, trade shows, and events that just don't fit either of the other two shows. Some are long, some are short, but they'll all have valuable insights, useful information, or just good conversation with thought leaders and subject matter experts. And now, the AV SuperFriends.
So we're here with Kelly Henderson at Evertz at InfoComm 2023. Kelly, what's new and cool with the interesting approach you guys have to AV?
Yeah.
I'm just going to hand you the mic.
Sounds good. So we've obviously spent the last couple of years really pushing our Koch switch side of the house. So historically Evertz has played on the broadcast side, and as we're starting to develop our AV business, we really wanted to focus on the direction of what's become sort of traditional AV over IP. So I think in the last year we've basically really focused on what's going to make install as smooth and easy as possible. What's going to allow us to work with IT departments really easily, whereas historically we were working with video engineer groups and maybe the broadcast video folks. But one of the big things that we've really pushed is to start expanding our gateway family, right? So we were one of the first houses, I think, to have a true transceiver that actually does an encode and decode simultaneously.
I think explain that to some people, because that's a very secret sauce thing. I think it's important. People who are building out in a classroom environment where we have bi-directional pieces, like talk about that in your box. I think that's really interesting to a lot of folks who may not have seen that.
So a couple, the kind of, I guess, the standard SKU when we get into the transceiver is it's our single head transceiver, CRXS, and so back of house PTZ camera and a display at the back of the room. That camera comes in as a discrete source that can be routed anywhere in your IP matrix, while at the same time that display can be fed by a discrete source originating anywhere in the system. So a lot of people will pitch a transceiver that's software configurable, right? So it might have an input and an output on board, but it's only ever doing a transmit or a receive. So if you're doing a transmit, you might get a loop out, but you're not dynamically routing to that as a source or as a destination. So our transceiver does do both, so there's no software configuration. It's truly an in and an out, right? And so that's really massive, both those back of room applications. In the lectern, we've got that as well. We've also got a 4x2 box that I think is really cool right now. So what's nice about the 4x2 is you kind of get the best of breed in terms of you almost get like a little matrix switch built into your networked AV, right? So I'll use the lectern as an example. I can have the 4x2 in a lectern. I have my 4 local sources, 2 local outputs. And so I can even feed that into like an HDBaseT extender to my main display.
Right.
And what's nice is if I'm switching on that device, I'm not leaving the device, hitting the switch and coming back. So you're getting that cleaner switch. You're getting truly lossless because you're not compressing anything. So you're switching on the matrix switch, but you're also able to then route off of that device over the network as well. So that particular device, local 4x2, but it does up to a dual transceive. So that's our kind of dual transceiver that we've added to the family, and really started pushing in the last 18 months as well.
So a small kind of a single lectern, couple sources, real quick and easy, get some loop outs, extend out over to your downstream.
The dual transceive, on the dual transceive side, is that 2 channels transceiving simultaneous bidirectional or 2 total, so one stream each direction, or 2 streams?
So there is some bandwidth limitations that drive those decisions. So if we're talking 1080p on 1 gig, then that's true 2 in and 2 out.
Okay.
If you're starting to get into the 4K world, so that's another thing that Evertz has really started pushing, especially recently, is supporting multiple, bandwidth. So we do 1 gig, 2.5 gig, and 10 gig native on this ecosystem. And what we're seeing a lot of in the last 12 months is the price of 2.5 gig has really come down. A lot of AV network switches are natively doing 2.5 gig anyway. So having multi-gig ports on our devices and supporting 2.5 gig, it gets you more feature sets. So dual transceive at 4K30, for example. But it also means less compression, even for 1080p, right? So you're always going to get higher quality. So you're getting more feature sets and less compression.
And are you guys doing up to 2.5 gig over copper, or is it through the SFP?
So 2.5 gig is copper.
Okay.
And then we do have, especially in the 4K 60 units, SFPs that support copper and fiber SFPs. So we can do 2.5 gig at fiber, we can do 2.5 gig at copper. 10 gig technically can do copper, but distance limitation becomes a bit
much more
a bit
fiber,
crippling. The other really big thing we added recently is the wall plate. So I don't even know if I've talked to you guys about it yet.
No, I don't think I've even seen a wall plate. I did want to mention that one of the attractive pieces to me on these endpoints is that HDMI and SDI.
Yeah.
Right? And so I like these in our more event-driven classroom spaces, and we do have some SDI infrastructure currently, and it allows us to kind of move that in the same way we move our HDMI traffic, right? So it's really quick, and I like that Swiss Army knife approach that you're kind of getting both versions of that on one box.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been sort of our bread and butter as a company is, when we got into AV, we kind of fell into these hybrid spaces, and so high-density SDI was really important to us. And on the 1 gig, I call it the 1 gig, but on the Nucleus platform, maintaining that as something that's really important to us was big, especially because we already had, the expertise in all of the scaling and color conversion that you need to do to go between the two worlds. Natively supporting SDI has been big. And we actually added 12G gearboxes recently. So doing 12G SDI native as part of the ecosystem as well, which is really important now that we're talking 4K 60, 4K 30 a lot on the PC side. Being able to pull that out as 12G SDI or come in as 12G SDI has been good.
So you have this new wall box? Is that
Okay. Yeah, so
it just looks like a wall box.
Yeah, so 2-gang wall plates. So we have a decode and an encode version. We're currently shipping the encode version. The decode version will be shipping in a couple months.
Okay. I can see this being for like those unique built gaming spaces and things like that. This could definitely be a play on that. I like that. Yeah,
it was something that we got a lot of feedback on. We had historically it's tough. So one of the things I should mention is that, especially because supply chain over the last few years, people are obviously starting to look at alternatives to what they may standardize on. And what we found in the last 12 months, as we're doing more and more of these shootouts with our competition, is that obviously not all codecs are made the same, right? And so people are moving from a particular manufacturer, and they might have certain expectations on the codec and on the compression. And a lot of AV over IP out there is GPU, software driven, and it's not necessarily cheaper. So with Evertz, we're one of the few that are doing a really high-end FPGA-based gateway encoder decoder. So with the FPGA technology, it's kind of like a real workhorse, right? So obviously we've had to get creative with heat sinks and fans and everything else, but what you're getting is a really robust FPGA-based hardware that's purpose-built to run really long time. So in the broadcast industry, we're typically 10 to 12 years mean time to failure. So that's sort of the design tenets that we work behind. And we use JPEG XS as our codec of choice. So it's a pretty large step up in terms of quality and lack of latency from a JPEG 2000 base, right? And a lot of the shootouts that we're doing, it's going to be in Evertz JPEG XS ecosystem. And almost every time it's going up against a JPEG 2000 situation where, you have the latency concerns and the loss concerns comparatively, and also FPGA versus GPU, and when you're thinking about failure rates and everything else.
Was the intent to be able to use that FPGA and modify that and change that kind of software base of firmware moving forward if and when you want to update that codec or whatever that may be?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very flexible, obviously. We can add really robust feature sets that we otherwise wouldn't be able to add. So the whole family of receive devices also supports picture-in-picture mode and dynamic scaling, which is all obviously driven by that FPGA base. So the ability to scale up video walls and do large common spaces and dynamically change from single image, multiple display to individual image, individual display really quickly. The picture-in-picture mode is something that we're getting asked about a lot recently as well. So smaller classroom space, you don't have the wall space for a dual projector or dual display. Now I can still have that talking head and content really dynamically, so I can very quickly change between single image, single display, to side by side, to stack, and those pips are all fully customizable as well.
And that's definitely something that's interesting to me from the standpoint of being able to show two sources simultaneously, even if I am dialing back one of them to be that little that pip mode or that talking head, and put that down in the corner for to capture through recording or whatnot.
Yeah.
So,
and we can play with aperture as well, so you can have some transparency on the beta image.
So, talk about you've added a fan here on top of some of these transceivers. Is that a reflection of more horsepower under the hood, more going on, and it needs the fan, or just a reflection of that the passive ones in some installs get a little toasty?
I'd say it's a bit of both. So. Okay. Honestly, so we still offer a fanless version of all of the devices.
With a note now that says, do not cram this into like a 1 RU space with everything else in it and close the door?
So yeah, I guess a little background for those that don't know, right? So the Dash Q version is now our quiet version. Okay. And historically, the default version was the quiet version, right? And so the fan was the purchase price. Honestly, the decision was driven by general feedback. So doing lab systems, doing demo kits, one of the first things I kept hearing back was, love it, it's hot, hot to touch. And so we just wanted to remove that concern from people, right? So we have tested them thoroughly, rated them to, very high temperatures. So they, a very comfortable operating temperature on the quiet version, so the fanless version would be 62 degrees. And we can drop that by about 20 degrees when we move to the fan version.
Significant.
But we have tested them up to 100 degrees. Okay. So we're fine with the temperature, but it was more of an optics thing. People put their hand on it, it's very hot. And to your point too, depending where you're installing it, the fan version just is less thought, right?
Bench and it wasn't. Yeah, they were warm, but it wasn't a problem. Mark crammed them into like a rack space.
But that's where things live.
The door. Yeah. Well, right. Yeah, because I was like, these don't get that warm. Yeah. And he's like, put it in a freaking rack. So
actually, to that point, one kind of cool thing that we did add this show is a 3RU frame chassis with a door that has high-powered fans on the front of it that does run fairly quiet. So what's nice about it is you can drive up to 2 power supplies on the frame itself, and then passively power the gateways.
Oh, okay.
So then the gateways will slide into the chassis. So it gets you some nice density in the rack. Historically, we've always recommended just putting a shelf in for our standalone gateways. Yeah. We do have the modular cards, but they're a little bit more expensive, and they're the 4K60 devices. So with the new frame, we could put up to 9 of these cards in 3RU. And we also added a dual transmit encoder that's pretty cost effective. So basically in 3RU, you can build an 18 transmit chassis, right? So you have 18 sources in the rack room, really clean, with that extra cooling in the rack room as well. So that's been kind of a cool new feature.
Cool. All right, well,
I think the only other new device that I want to call attention to would be our quad box.
Okay.
So we added a receiver. We've seen some buy-in from like sim labs, med schools especially, where they just want to throw down multi-viewer. So instead of having to buy a really expensive dedicated multi-viewer that's driving a large wall, if you just want to see like a quad somewhere in your system,
it's simple,
drop down decoder. Now it does require a 10 gig connection, but you can drive up to 4 sources to a single device, and then it's got a fully customizable multi-viewer for up to 4 sources.
And what line was that in?
That's part of Nucleus.
It's in Nucleus?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Might have use for that right now.
Awesome.
A dual video wall system.
Crazy video wall thing?
Yeah.
And you can stack them, so we can stack them up to a 16.
How many layers can you go?
So that multi-viewer is actually part of Nucleus on the wall.
So it's got 4.
So 16 windows would be the most we would recommend.
It's a lot, yeah. I mean, a simple 4x is probably a lot for most people. That's
the majority of buy-in.
Yeah, cool. All right.
But I think that's everything that's really new on our end.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you for kind of giving us a little bit of rundown here of some of the new stuff from the transceivers and the encoder decoders. For those listening, if you're looking for different options and versions, give Evertz a look. The new Nucleus and the AV line is definitely worth looking at if you're looking at alternates for your AV over IP environments. Awesome.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
really good to see you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of AV SuperFriends Perspectives. If you have a perspective to share, you can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.